Well, and those are the conversations we need to have. There's no doubt that I do believe that there is enough improved now, without a doubt. I absolutely agree with you 100% there. Sometimes folks ask, you know, they point to saying, hey, can the farmer do X? Well, that's kind of like coming to me and saying, me as a builder, well, you're a builder, do this, with you know, do it this way, do it that way. But that's not the way my particular construction company works. So when they say that I mean, folks have come to me and say, well, they'd like to see the farm, you know, say the Wilcom farm. I want the Wilcom farm to be an organic farm. Well, that's great, but the Wilcoms are 80 years old. Who's going to do that? Who's going to give them the money for that? I mean, what I see here is that I agree with everyone here in as much as that the roads need improvement. We need to work towards that. I don't have the exact answer how we get there. The state has ignored 75 for years, but it's also been a political football that's been kicked around and kicked back every single. You've lived here a long time. How many times has 75 been kicked off the priority list?
It's never really been on the priority
list. It actually is. It's number 2 now. It was number 1 before. It was number 1.
That's just on the county list. That's not on the state list.
It is not on the state list, but the state listens to the counties, and that's the way the process works.
Really listen.
So, well, supposed to. So, but to that end, yeah, I think there's enough. And, you know, if we're going to relook at the zoning, the comprehensive plan, I agree with you. We need more, say, light industrial and commercial areas. I mean, I know for a fact a business owner over here I was talking to the other day, and just across where the bank is, the Bank of America, that little development there with Buffalo Wild Wings. And, you know, they were lamenting how much they were paying for their space, and they're in a residential area, but they're not they're in a retail space, but the business they have isn't retail, but they don't have any access to commercial space here in Urbana. Well, that to me is kind of like an oversight. How do we fix that? You know, so we have to go back to the comprehensive plan in order to do that. I, for one, though, will be honest with you, I'm very, very leery about opening up that comprehensive plan again and going through that, because that becomes that political football. And I think the county needs to, we're not going to agree on everything. I hope that we can come to agreement on some things. But what I've witnessed in the 42 years I've lived here, and so I'll say for the last 20 years that I've been paying attention, like I said, that pendulum going to the far left and then to the far right. And then the only people that really get, excuse my French, that get screwed is us. And we're out there. So we can't stop all those things that you just mentioned. They're on the books and they're coming. The only thing I can say for sure is most of that, I mean, the one farm, some of these farms are DRAs, they can't even start for 6 years.
That doesn't necessarily make me feel better.
It doesn't make me feel better either, but it does allow us time to plan and absorb things. If we could have the age restricted, it would help because we would not have to build a school, which I think is important, and provide needed services for people in the county. You know, maybe someone else will have an idea like the Buckingham's Choice, you know, in areas where elderly care can be taken to a higher level. You know, do we want that kind of development? I mean, those are the kind of questions I think we need to ask. And
when you do, let me, one final comment, when you do look back at the comprehensive plan, which it sounds like you are destined to do, sadly perhaps, but happily for some of us, can you please also look at the watershed area and how it drains into Lake Linganore? Because the more development, the more destruction of that critical area draining into Lake Linganore, the more water treatment is going to cost and the more chemicals have to be added to the water to clean it up for all of the people moving here, and the less healthy the water is. If we can keep that water cleaner by letting it filter before it goes into the lake, it would be better for everyone's health.
I do need to correct something here, though. The area that feeds into Lake Linganore is about 80 square miles, and it's mostly farmland. And my farmer friends will beat me up for this, but most of the runoff is from the farm fields and the building in and around Lake Linganore. And you can go to Lake Linganore people and talk to them. They will give you those facts, and they know that it is not from the building. There's only like 3 square miles of where actually the building goes on around the lake. It's a very large watershed. And I don't want people to be misled, because there again, I believe people need to know the truth and not to say that the developers and builders are causing all that damage to the lake. The lake's been there since 1969, 68. And it's never been dredged. There was never any plans for it to be dredged. Now, fortunately, between the county, the Lake Linganore, and the city, and I don't want to hear this, and the developers are picking up the tab to have that lake dredged. And the biggest thing they're working on right now is they have to work through the Maryland Department of the Environment in order to find places to properly dispose of that when they get it out. There is no timeline for it right now, but they are working on that, and water is very critical. Excuse me one second, Mr. Rosen, I'm right behind you.
My name is Paul Rose, and I live in Newmarket, and I represent Roy Stanley. I'm a lawyer at Miles and Stockbridge. And if we're going to have a discussion about Monrovia Town Center, I certainly...
Excuse me.
Okay.
I just want to grab a glass of water.
I know, it's not bad.
And I also want to do, Bud Otis is here, the president of the council, and I'm sorry I didn't see him speak in. I thought Bud might like to say something to you. I know you all like it.
It's always good when your representatives that you elected stop and talk to you. I think that we need to do more of it. We've tried to do more in the last few months, and I commend Tony for having this town meeting tonight. I appreciate the work you're putting into it. That helps him to better know how you feel when he gets into the voting that will be coming up. These are tough decisions. I wish that that hadn't been placed on our agenda. We're still dealing with things that were from the past Board of County Commissioners, but we're going to deal with it. And I hope that in the final analysis, we do the right thing, and I hope that you keep talking to us, because I've learned a lot. And I have had my executive assistant print out the record, and it's on the table. It's about this tall so far, double-sided, and I think they're about done. If I want to see the full record, I want to know exactly what was there, and happy vacation, right? But we appreciate your comments, and keep them coming, and Tony is really trying to do his best to listen, and it's a difficult thing. So I commend you, Tony, and keep up the good work. My wife and I wanted to slip in for a few minutes and see what was happening. I promised to take her out to lunch or to dinner tonight, but I said, I got one stop I need to make. I want to stop and see what's happening in Monrovia. But we appreciate you and appreciate what you're doing. And this is a great community, and we want to try to keep it that way as much as we can.
Councilman Otis. I won't ask you a question because I don't want to take your time, but I want to say personally that thank you, first of all, for stopping by, because I know that you're council at large, so that you need to make a decision on this. And second of all, I know you're not happy that this is on your plate, but we're very happy that it's on your plate. I mean that sincerely, because I believe that you guys will listen to us and that you will do what we're asking you to do, because this is our community. And the prior BOCC did not do that. So thank you very, very much. And thank you as well for spending some time with us.
Councilman Otis, before you take your wife to dinner, can I, and it's a great opportunity for the residents of Monrovia to be able to talk to their elected officials and to you, but I'd like to say a couple of words on behalf of my client who's also here. I myself am a resident of Newmarket. My name is Paul Rose. I represent Roy Stanley. And I would like to express a couple thoughts about what you've said. This Monrovia area has been planned for growth since 1956. And I really, at least, or going back to the 50s. And I think it's important to place this discussion in the appropriate context.
Say that we've heard this before from you.
And while you spoke, my client sat here quietly.
But he doesn't live here. That's why it doesn't even, he lives in Frederick County. He's been at every one of our meetings.
I live in Frederick
County.
Tony.
speak here as a citizen, not as a representative of your
If
client.
we're here to
You're
lobby
being
the
paid
council,
to be
I
here
think
to represent a
This is
man.
not
Tony,
about
speak, please.
him.
Just-
This is
All right.
about us, it's
I-
not about him.
You all have definitely been very respectful of me, and I would just ask you to say, I know there's a lot of emotion involved here, but I would at least ask you to listen to Mr. Rhodes.
Tony,
just
he's
to
not
give him some-
representing a constituent of yours.
I understand
He's
that,
not.
but there
Why
are.
does
It's not
He doesn't,
appropriate.
his
It's unfair that
client
you
doesn't
take
even
our
live
time
on
Can I
it.
express-
to
can
let
I
him
express to you
speak.
though, that he is representing someone who is doing business in this district.
We're stretching things, Tony.
And so,
But he's not,
I'm not stretching
I
things.
just like to cut off, the Wilkins and live in this county and live there any longer than any of y'all here, so let Mr. Rhodes have his say. It's not only me, it's the
If Mr.
Wilkins.
Wilkins here and
and
wants to talk, then he can. I respect Mr.
He's
Wilkins.
representing them, so please.
And that is
He's
true.
a paid attorney.
Mr. Rhodes is representing the Wilkins, and I will tell you this right now, Bill Wilkham can't even make it here because he's very ill.
I'm not going
That's
to
the
attack
truth.
anyone, I just want to say a couple of 2 minutes just to put the discussion in the appropriate context. The frustration that we have is that my client bought this property in Monrovia knowing that it was planned for growth. And he made a huge investment of money to do that. And then he decided he was going to develop the property, which was the plan, and he went through and he got phase 1 approval, and he went through and he got phase 2 approval, and then the property was downzoned. After he spent millions of dollars in that effort, the property was downzoned. Its zoning was pulled out from under him. And so then he filed a lawsuit. And that lawsuit
Which he
went
lost.
all the way up to the Court of Special Appeals. And when the Blaine Young Board was voted into office, that litigation was stayed, it was paused, so that my client could go back and file a new application with the Board of County Commissioners, which he did. And he went through that process. And Frederick County has laws, right? We're a society of laws. We talk about roads. We talk about schools. Frederick County has an adequate public facilities ordinance, okay? That ordinance explains exactly what a developer like Mr. Stanley has to do in terms of making contributions for road improvements, making contributions for schools. He's dedicated a huge school site. He went through this entire process. It was a give and take with Frederick County staff. Keep in mind, the project was already approved, phase 2 approval for an age-restricted, all age-restricted community. That was downzoned. Then we went back and we filed a new application. We gave the county staff what the county told us they wanted us to apply for. We worked with the county. We went through that entire process again, spending millions upon millions of more dollars to go through the process. And then we ended up in public hearings, okay? We went through 50 hours of public, please, ma'am, please, ma'am.
Yeah, I do too.
We went
You
through
are
50
patronizing this
we
whole
went through
audience.
50
It is
hours.
inappropriate.
We went through 50 hours of public
So what I
hearings.
hear you
okay?
Public
saying
hearings
is
are
that
because
The
we
matter
can't.
was
We know all
decided.
this.
My
Get to
client,
the point, come
Code
on.
is short.
If you want to have your say,
My-
say it.
original approval with
folks, please,
just as bad as.
please, common courtesy,
Mr.
please.
Rhodes,
Yeah, there's no person.
just wrap it up.
Yeah,
quickly.
the point I'm
We're here to
making is
talk
that
to our,
we
I'm gonna
passed,
give him another, one more minute, and then he's. gonna sit
my
down.
client passed every law, every regulation that Frederick County has. We're very pleased that you're reviewing the record. That was our suggestion at the very beginning when this matter went back on remand. Please do review that record carefully, because the record will show that my client followed the law to a T and has followed that law, and that project, Monrovia Town Center, was appropriately approved.
I have to disagree.
So I thank you.
When they switched it and decided it would be half age restricted, there was a whole other set of requirements they were required
I'm
to go through.
familiar with all that.
To do that with age restricted, the county did not do that. So they did not follow the rules in that respect.
so we'd like to be
I'm gonna give
invited to
this
the next
Mrs.
meeting
Dale-
with Mr. Stanley.
Not only that, they didn't study our regional transportation
I'm gonna
plan
give
like they were
Mrs. Dale an
supposed to.
opportunity to, she's
So
been
they
very quiet.
didn't do that. There's a regional component that was not followed.
Thank you. I'm Valerie Dale, and I'm also from the market. And nobody pays me to do this. I've lived here for 20 years. And probably for just as long, I've worked on the impact of growth, residential growth specifically, on our county. A couple of thoughts, and then I'll get to my comment and my question. In terms of the budget and education, after having advocated for education here in this county, and also seeing what Fairfax County does with its public schools and its budget, it would seem to me the best approach to consider is what's the percent of the budget that we as a county want to allocate to education in order to make it attractive to bring in businesses that provide good jobs. And the easy way to do that is to Google it and look at different business articles. I'm not talking about community activists or developers or anybody else, but the corporate business writings on it. That's what. In terms of the budget, you're right, the county executive does develop the budget based on revenues we have. But the county council is the one that winds up either approving or deleting items from the budget, but are also the ones that are responsible for potentially creating new revenue streams in order to help the budget. What we've been doing is balancing the budget by cutting on services and cutting on things like schools, improvements on roads. So we've cut things to balance a budget that hasn't been sufficient for way too long. To get to my comments, my question, without naming any development that shall not be named, this whole region has seen significant growth. My children, my daughter is 28 now, spent her entire school career in overcrowded schools in the Newmarket, Linganore region. We finally got things somewhat under control because we adopted a better APFO that has now been gutted. We increased the impact fees to where they actually help to pay for growth for the construction and capital budgets. And we began to advocate for 2 schools a year instead of 1 school a year. And we had to do that with the state as well, and got the state to agree to that. So we did some catch up, and there are people who will tell you the people in this room are anti-development, and there are people who would accuse me of having been the same, and still the same. I don't believe that's true. I believe that the people who have worked with rail, the people in our community in District 2, are people who want to see responsible growth. So what's responsible growth? Responsible growth is growth that balances your infrastructure and your services with the amount of growth concurrently. And that's the way you create a sustainable future for everybody who lives in the county, but also for the county itself. One of the things that we did do to capture the cost of new growth in terms of the capital budget was the creation of impact fees and the raising of impact fees. But those have been diminished. The excise fee or tax was something that was created to help pay for roads. But that was one of the 262 taxes and fees that was eliminated by the past board. So you don't have that revenue stream anymore to help pay for the roads. The thing we have never been good at is capturing the cost of the impact of new growth on services that come from the operating budget. In 1997, the American Farmland Trust did a study here. And what they found...
Sure. Did you want to take your record in?
Yeah.
Thanks for coming back. I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. So for every dollar, excuse me, I'm sorry. For every dollar in revenue generated from property taxes for a single family, well, for residential growth, it costs the county $1.14. Now that's in 1997 dollars. So you're creating this debt in terms of funding for the operating budget that goes to services like school, like fire and rescue, like EMS, the whole 9 yards. So if we don't begin to try to find a way to capture that, I just want to know how you propose to pay for that. How do you propose to pay for the deficit that we're creating in the operating budget because of the revenue not being equal to the property tax? I mean, the cost of services not being equal to the property tax. In fact, the July 5th, Washington Post ran an article about Loudoun County. Loudoun County's number is even worse. For every dollar they get for revenue for property taxes, it's costing Loudoun County $1.62 to fund their services. So they're creating an even bigger deficit. And I think probably our number's higher than the $1.14. But at some point, we have to acknowledge that there is a cost of growth besides quality of life and besides the capital budget, but it's also about the operating budget. And that's why schools are having such a tough time. There's not enough revenue, we have too many kids to serve. So I guess my question is, how do you propose to fund this?
Andrew, to get that.
No, so we have balance first, that's.
I suspect, I think when we look at all of that, and I think everybody can agree with, and all the numbers that you just came, I guess, just put forward. What time frame were they in? In other words, are we taking a snapshot of today? Are we taking a snapshot from 2004 to 2010? Where's the snapshot in time?
The snapshot was in 1997 here, 18 years ago. So 18 years worth of inflation has happened since that point in time.
Okay, so.
So we need a new AFT.
Well, so that number, $1.14 or the $1.62 that you said about Loudoun County in terms
Right,
of the
and they
deficit, in
just
terms
did theirs.
of revenue.
Not future.
Okay, so the question is, when you take that snapshot in time, if we took that same snapshot in time, say in 2003, 4, 5, when revenues were going through the roof, home prices were going through the roof, and things like that were occurring in terms of the economy, before it fell, before home values went down and our taxes went down as a result of that. So my question is, back to you is, when we look at those numbers, I mean, I can sit here and probably produce a whole set of numbers that could skew them in a different way. I don't want to get bogged down in that because I do believe we have serious problems here. And as many people have suggested, we need to look at a better way of planning things out, correct? So when that's happened, and I'll go back again, what has happened in the county though? So great ideas, no doubt. I mean, I hear what you're saying. But I ask you then, when that pendulum swings back and forth, and you take away, people don't like to hear this, but property rights, and you downzone property rights, and you do things like that, so that one board of county commissioners did this, and I'm not just pointing to one board, and another board did this, and it goes back to the left, or back to the right. We don't have, comprehensive zoning, done every 2 years, isn't exactly comprehensive.
No.
I mean, that's what we've got, and I can point to not just the previous Young board, but to the Gardner board, and the Gardner board before that when they were doing the same thing. It's a reality. I can sit here and I'm not going to point fingers, but that's
No.
the truth.
And I agree. For 20 years, I have watched that happen, been part of that happening, been part of creating a stronger APFL, increasing the impact fees, looking at concurrency committees, looking at different counties and how they were doing it. So I get that. I get the pendulum back and forth. The question becomes, if you want to stop the pendulum from swinging, how do we begin to capture the costs so that new growth pays for itself, so taxpayers aren't going to get stuck with a bill, so that you wind up welcoming
Well,
people
can you give
into
me
the
an
county
example?
instead of people being pissed?
Can you give me an example where that would happen? Because the APFO, per the state of Maryland, like I stated earlier, has to be fair to the person doing the
The
development.
APFO is under Article 66B, it's not a state
Well,
ordinance, okay?
in terms of, but they have dictated certain language, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. If I'm wrong, well, I'll look into it. My
This is-
point is, though, the APFO has stated has to be, it can't be duly unfair to the development. What impact do they really have?
What impact
What impact,
does
okay,
residential development have in this county? It costs in terms of things like your infrastructure, for roads, water, sewer, parks, libraries, schools, and then it costs in terms of your operating budget for services such as education, fire and safety, and we could go on in terms of the,
but we're not operating a deficit.
pardon me?
We are not operating a deficit. There's a lot of things in the operating
We are
deficit that I
operating on a
can, that I
deficit.
can.
That's where I disagree with you. We're operating on a deficit because anybody who goes out on the road and drives them knows their parking lots, not roads. Anybody who sits and has kids in schools in this region knows their kids are at some point in time, if not all of their career, going to sit outside the main schoolhouse, potentially in portables. Teachers are not getting
let me
paid well.
ask you
We're
this.
losing good teachers. So we've balanced the budget in a way that cuts all the services and the infrastructure funding. That's not a balanced budget.
What's the overall capacity of schools in Frederick County?
I don't know off the top of my head. There are 3 different levels.
No one likes to hear this word, but if you redistricted, you know as well as I do that the school capacity is under 90%. That's a fact. You want to save money? Let me redistrict your schools.
That becomes problematic as well and expensive because then you're paying for transportation costs.
Okay, transportation costs as opposed to $106 million for a high school, which is $106 million because the previous administration in the state government insists that we pay prevailing wages. So the cost of that high school increased by $16 million.
Prevailing wages was state.
That's what I said.
State
Not,
hires?
Martin O'Malley. Okay, yeah.
So that
Martin
people
O'Malley.
don't get confused.
Sorry,
Which administration?
so. The point is,
But then you're blaming.
we want to have the discussion. You want to have the discussion, but do you want to make the hard choices? Do you want Councilman Chmelik to say, okay, I'll go for some sort of, I will never do a moratorium, I'll tell you that right now. Building accounts for 9% of the economy in Frederick County, not including the ancillary businesses.
But at what
from
real
it.
cost is what she's saying?
Yeah,
The real cost, I mean, you can sit there and say, oh, it's 9%, and that's great that it's all going in there, but we're not really getting any of it. Our roads are suffering, our schools are suffering, our quality of life is suffering. We're sitting here telling you that. We're not getting any of this 9% from the marvelous building. It's not happening. It's a
What would
figment.
happen to revenue, well, it's definitely a bigger picture. It's definitely more than just, you know, one variable or 2 variables or 3. It's multiple variables, just like you suggested.
Can I get back to the question? How do you propose to fund the operating budget when we're creating a deficit with every new home? That's not what I'm suggesting.
I do not agree with your premise that the residential construction is creating a deficit. Because we do, I can bring you a report if you'd like, if you need I will send you a report that actually says just the opposite. So that's what I'm saying. I don't want a tit for tat argument. I don't want a left side and a right side. I want to find a realistic solution.
That's what I'm suggesting.
And the bottom line is, we have all this development right here, right now. You cannot stop everything that's north. What would you like to do with it?
You cannot call a moratorium on development. But with 20 to 30,000 houses in the pipeline, we don't have to go approve it.
Okay, stop right there. I will not let you do that. You will not come in here and quote numbers that are absolutely wrong. This young lady coming in the back, and gotta be 30, right? You had stated about the number of homes that are being built in there. Okay. It is not 20 or 30,000 homes in this district.
In the Frederick County.
Thank
In
you.
the county.
But even then, I would like to see those numbers too, because that's, and there are 20 or 30,000 homes over how many years? 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 50 years?
There's a 30-year build out on it. That's what they have been saying from the planning department, it's what's been
So
published
you're
in the
suggesting that
newspaper
50,000, 30,000 homes will be built
over the next 30 years.
in 30 years? So you're saying the population of Frederick County is going to increase double,
We've been doing 700 to 1,100 for the last 20 years.
711
700 to 1,100, 1,200 at the
Homes.
last 20 years.
Well, no, those numbers are, they were less during the recession considerably, and we're still not back up to the 1,500 homes